So, Michael, the whole changes, all of the changes that have occurred in regards to stamp duty payable to first home buyers, or payable by, I should say, first home buyers, and the impact on that and the changes to investors, which haven't been, by the politicians really put out there as important as I know that you and I might think it is. So maybe you could explain it to everybody.
Yeah, definitely. There's been major changes or announcements made in the last 2 weeks. Effectively, from the 1st of July this financial year, or this calendar year, first home buyers purchasing property under $600,000 will no longer pay stamp duty. Previously, they had a reduction of 50%, but now that is going altogether. So, for a first home buyer, it's a substantial saving on the cash that they will need to be able to complete a purchase. The interesting part of that conversation is it doesn't kick in until the 1st of July. Does it mean that a first home buyer should be looking to purchase now and paying the extra stamp duty? Or should they be delaying their purchase until the 1st of July, but potentially competing with other first home buyers that didn't have the money previously to commit to purchasing and now do so because of the rule change?
Mm-hmm.
The interesting one for us though is that there's been a major change as well announced, but actually slipped under the radar with respect to press releases and the marketplace, in that there's always been in Victoria a consideration or a reduction in stamp duty for people purchasing off the plan, both for investors, owner-occupiers, first-home buyers, where they pay stamp duty on the dutiable value of the property at the time that they make the time they sign the contract, which could be on a $600,000 purchase price, only a dutiable value of $100,000 or $150,000. So rather than paying $27,000, $28,000 in stamp duty, they might only be paying $1,000 or $2,000. That will disappear from the 1st of July for investors.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'd like to sort of know how you think that'll affect the market.
Well, firstly, I think not the main thing, I think one thing that we would say, and I'm speaking on behalf of you here and on behalf of our company and clients, supporting first home buyers is a good thing.
Yes.
And, we would encourage, as we do, and we have for many, many years, the children of our clients or those younger clients of ours to enter the home market or enter the property market as soon as they can. And the hardest thing for them, and you know this in a way, Michael, better than me because you consult with regard to financial planning with more clients than me. The hardest thing is to get the to get the capital together. It's not normally the cash flow, is it?
That's right, definitely.
So this saving is a very important incentive for first home buyers.
It is. Although it reminds me, I first moved to Melbourne in 2000. And 2000 was when they first brought out the first homeowners grants and boosts and reductions in stamp duty. And they did that in response to the tech bubble bursting and the economy slowing down. And the two things they did was drop interest rates substantially and provide this grant or boost to first home buyers. The resulting property markets in Melbourne, you might remember, we saw substantial growth from 2001 to 2004.
Yep.
We've seen substantial growth in the Melbourne property market in the top end, the homes above $700,000 or $800,000 in value in the last 3 or 4 years because of reduction in interest rates. Hasn't necessarily grown through to the bottom end of the market yet. But throwing fuel onto the fire with respect to this extra stamp duty benefit and the grants and the boosts that have been increased, I really do see the market taking off in that sub $600,000 price range.
Yeah, and I think that you wouldn't remember this, you nearly won't remember the person, but Billy Snedden, who was a Prime Minister of our country many years ago, is often quoted as saying, and I often quote him as saying once, he said, the great Australian dream is to own your own home. And when Billy Snedden said it, he meant 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, brick veneer with a 1/4 acre. Now, of course, that's changed, and it's changed all up and down the eastern seaboard, definitely changed in Perth, because owning your own home could now be a townhouse. It could be an apartment. So when we talk about first home buyer grant, there will be an impact that you're making on not just houses, whether they're in the outer urban areas, western areas of Sydney or Melbourne, outer areas of Brisbane, will have an impact on the inner urban markets as well, because a lot of first home buyers will be buying, that apartment in Port Melbourne or Brunswick or in Pyrmont or wherever it might be. So there's an impact across the board, I think.
So how do you think the changes with the investment or the stamp duty reduction on an investment off the plan purchase at the moment will flow through from 1st of July when that's abolished and investors pay the full stamp duty?
Okay. tread where devils might fear to tread. The problem I have with this announcement, and the problem that I have with the Labor Party's conversation about prohibiting negative gearing for properties other than new property, is that I think, in a sense, they're thought bubbles. They're politically popular. They seem to support the general population or the working class, which I have no problems with supporting the general population. I have no problems with supporting the working class. But in both instances, what worries me is that they're basically politically driven. Now, with regard to the Victorian circumstance, if we start from the back, there are two sides to this change that I'm certain will have negative impacts on the community as a whole, and I'm fearful as to the extent of those impacts. Firstly is available property for rent, and I hear you quoting Michael, I hear you quoting our property management business and saying we've got no vacancies and we manage hundreds and hundreds of properties. People think there's a lot to rent, there's not. And so that's the first area that I think it hasn't been taken into account by changing the circumstances for stamp duty for investors and not allowing them to pay at the price of the land at the point they purchase. The second issue is the construction industry and accompanying consultancy industries, whether architects or whatever. And there's, we speak to the different people we know, politicians and people in financing and people in construction, and they basically say the economy of the Eastern Seaboard has been supported to a great extent, not totally, but to a great extent by construction through the last decade and a half. Now, to impact that overnight, which we think this will, I think that there'll be effects that Daniel Andrews hasn't taken into account. Now, as far as the availability of investment property and the impact of that, what we can tell everybody is that to get developments, whether a small townhouse development of 5 townhouses or whether a big apartment building, to the point where banks will fund it, most of that is nearly always purchased by investors. And then after that, we find that investors purchase. Now, by impacting investors to that amount of capital in terms of having to have that available to pay stamp duty, I think that the government's going to get a rude awakening. I think it will really impact developments that go forward. It'll tighten the market and in fact have the contrary effect. What do you think?
Well, I think combined with the fact that there's a foreign stamp duty tax of 7% on foreign investors purchasing.
Maybe explain that to people.
That's right. So foreign investors in current rule changes, if they purchase property in Victoria, they can only buy property that's brand new, not yet lived in. So they're restricted to actually purchasing typically off the plan property or new property. They now pay a penalty stamp duty of 7%. If we combine that now with they don't get the reduction in stamp duty that an investor would, they'll be paying the 5.5-6% stamp duty as well. So effectively, for a Chinese investor to purchase in Melbourne, and typically they will buy in a high-rise tower, they're paying a 13% tax. So on a $700,000 purchase, it's $100,000. Now, it's not a case where they can only buy in Melbourne, and some will buy in Melbourne because of family considerations or university or need or desire. But they can easily take that money and go elsewhere, whether it be Perth or Queensland, where stamp duty is substantially lower and that there's not these penalty taxes, whether that be the US or Canada. So effectively, I see that the difficulty in getting a tower out of the ground, which does provide a lot of rental opportunities for people in Melbourne, is going to get substantially more difficult. You combine with the fact that it's harder for Chinese investors to fund their purchases, through bank lending, and it's harder for them to remove the money out of the market, out of the Chinese market. So I really do see, maybe not affecting that 5-unit townhouse development, but definitely some of the towers that we've built in Melbourne that have 2, 3, 4, 500 apartments in that supply the rental accommodation that tenancy needs could disappear.
Yeah.
We've currently got a 1.7% vacancy rate in Melbourne for tenancy, which is the lowest it's been for 10 years. If you take out a substantial amount of supply into the market into the future from that specific size or space, combining that with the population growth, Melbourne's population grew at 123,000 people last year, the highest ever, and the highest in Australia. You combine those two things, then we are going to see some rental traumas. We're going to see substantial rents increasing, and a very low vacancy rate to a point where unless you know somebody, you're not going to get a property to rent.
And what you were referring before, and may not have explained myself appropriately, Michael, but most definitely there will be property development that doesn't go ahead. I think for our investor clients in the medium term, let's say out to 5 years, that's a very positive thing because of the changes. But it's going to have a negative impact in regard to what the government's trying to achieve, and it just concerns me. But there is another point to mention, and that is because it is the 30th of June, that for any persons that might like to invest within the next 12 months, they can get the advantage of the concessions, and they should most definitely be thinking about doing it now.
So you think that's the opportunity? We've got a window of time.
To 3 months.
That's it, where we buy today,
Yep.
we pay one rate of stamp duty as an investor,
Yep.
ticks over on the 1st of July and we see a substantial increase in the rate of stamp duty that's more paid, which effectively is an opportunity cost. It's equity or capital that you're using
Yep.
that you can't put into other investments and get a return on by looking at other things.
And I think sometimes people think stamp duty is a given right of a community or governments to charge. But if you think of it as your money, and as you said, as equity, and let's pretend we put $30,000, instead of paying stamp duty, we put it into a property, which would enable us to easily, at a loan to value ratio of 70-30, to borrow 100,000. So that's 100,000 we've been stopped from investing in property for 10 years, and it would be an absolute reasonable expectation that that 100,000 would double within a 10-year period. So that means because that person paid the stamp duty after the 30th of June, they've lost 100,000 over 10 years. So the opposite occurs if they save that 30,000 in stamp duty. They can put it into the property, buy more property.
Yep. And that's got to apply for self-administrated funds as well, where
Yep.
you've got a limitation to capital. By using some of that to pay stamp duty, which is just a tax, you are taking away from future opportunities.
Exactly. And I suppose the way we would like to discuss these things and confer them on our clients is to say, we're not saying rush in and buy and hurry. It has to be appropriate for their circumstances. It's got to be correct. But there is a very real opportunity in the next 3 months to save $20,000 to $30,000 to $40,000 and put it into an investment property. And don't panic, everybody, if you're thinking about this stamp duty circumstance on the market. We actually think it'll be positive in 5 years. Negative for the community, but positive for you as property investors. So, Michael, given the things we've been talking about, what should people do in terms of their particular situation?
I think it's important always to get professional advice. So I think it's a matter of contacting your advisor, which could be us, and sitting down and having a look at your individual circumstances and working out a strategy. That strategy might be it's attractive to purchase now between now and the 30th of June because that'll get you a better result than waiting until the 1st of July.
Yeah.